Yo, book review. Stephen King's Pet Sematary 1983. Not the first Stephen King novel that I've reviewed on this channel. Some of you may remember that I reviewed It a couple of years ago, and I enjoyed reviewing that book, so hopefully I'll enjoy reviewing this book. Books are good, and they're fun to review. I don't read nearly as much books as I do watch films. I think altogether I've read about 12 novels in my adult life, but I really do enjoy the act of reading, like a lot of people do. I mainly discuss films and TV on this channel. It's all within the filmmaking medium, but occasionally I do like to branch out and review, talk about, discuss alternative types of media, like books, games, music even, maybe. I'm usually quite a slow reader, but at the pace that I got through Pet Sematary, I'd say that it's my fastest reading pace to date, which means that this book was very thrilling and gripping. I do find Stephen King's writing to be very captivating and easy to get through. It's purely escapist literature, really, and famously he primarily deals in horror. It's very pulpy, it's a lot of fun. It's different to something like Crime and Punishment, which is another book I'm trying to get through, which I'm finding quite difficult at the moment. There are some books that are more so projects. They're very educational, very academic. They require a lot of work to get into, they're think pieces. But then we also have works like Pet Sematary, which are more so geared towards escapism. This is my third Stephen King book that I've read. It was my first, It was my first Stephen King book. Then I read Salem's Lot, which was really good. I've already talked about it on this channel. That was a very flawed but special book in my opinion. I'm glad that I read it. Very striking, to say the least. Indulgent, broad, but covered a wide array of themes and ideas. It was a fascinating read. But Pet Sematary, however, may be the best Stephen King novel that I've read to date, but I'll touch upon that later. Now, even though Stephen King is known for horror, and he has very much earned that reputation, I've found that his novels aren't singularly about upfront scariness. Like you'd expect from any decent novelist, he incorporates a great amount of subtext and themes into his works. He'll use these horror concepts to illustrate shocking truths about humanity or life in general. His books can be quite philosophical. The knowledge that they impart on the reader can be very challenging and, rather fittingly, fairly disturbing. His works truly do live up to the idea of horror. They scare you both viscerally and psychologically. It may force you to come to terms with some fairly grisly truths about yourself or the world around you. It doesn't simply end at, ooh, scary clown, because It, for instance, that's about a whole multitude of different things. That's quite an expansive range of possible interpretations. However, it should be known that when his books do stray into the conventional horror motifs, like the killer clown, the blood-sucking vampires, the creepy cat, they absolutely nail them. There's a lot of subtext, but the horror elements should not be dismissed because they are in and of themselves terrific and blood-curdling. Conventional, typical horror in all the best possible ways. There's nothing wrong with conventional horror. I'm coming for you, Rachel. So far, I've never seen Stephen King write anything tritely cliche. He always manages to add his own unique spin to these long-lasting concepts and ideas. However, I should also note that I've never felt his writing to be obligatorily subversive either. He'll have his own rendition on things, but it just feels personal. It never feels like he's trying so hard to be against the grain. And when it comes to the subtext and themes of Pet Sematary itself, I'd say it's quite apparent what the central theme of the novel is. To put it briefly, it is a book about grief and death. It is a book about coming to terms with the idea of grief and death. A book that approaches these topics from numerous different angles. For me, one specific theme that I think it nails is this idea of warring with grief and death, which are almost forces of nature in this book. Not only not accepting the loss of a loved one, but going a step further and actually attempting to bargain with this ethereal, unknowable entity that is death. Death is something that you cannot bargain with, and that's a lesson we all must learn at some stage in our lives. But what this book does is, with the help of the supernatural concepts, it explores what may happen if someone were given this impossible ability to defy death, and furthermore it explores the horrendous, perverse consequences of doing such a thing. And Stephen King puts his viscerally illustrative writing techniques to use, depicting these consequences and implications in such deeply unsettling ways that the book acts as this cautionary tale. Now, I do need to just say spoilers. I need to spoil this book to talk about it further, so yeah, you've been warned. Spoilers! On paper, the plot of this book is uber simple. In fact, like 3 major events occur in the narrative. In the first half of the book, the main character does something, and then in the second half of the book, he does that same thing again, but the context is astronomically different. I wouldn't even call this a conventional horror scare fest where the family move into the home and all of these malevolent ghostly forces gradually close in around them. Things get more scary and fast-paced and tense, and the ghosts start flipping up shit towards the end.
Dad, look out!
Pet Sematary actually has a very slim amount of those high-octane, fast-paced, adrenaline-fueled moments. It's more so about the characters experiencing certain things and then making decisions based on the things they experience. Most of the horror stems from the awfulness of the situations that the main characters find themselves in, usually of their own making. It's a story that disturbs you with the concept of you voluntarily going down a dark path out of desperation and despair. At least for me, it was the experience of living in the main character's head as he mentally descended that got to me the most. Because even though the plot is totally supernatural, the human elements are profoundly real. It was very much the same with Salem's Lot, which was actually Stephen King's second published novel. In that, King offered his own personal take on the vampire myth, in which he recontextualized it by setting it in contemporary America. More so, the main character was a very modern, ordinary man for the time, and the whole point was what would happen if someone from our real world faced such threats. Not a particularly original idea by today's standards, but at the time it was quite novel because back then vampires were all about Dracula and old world stuff. Setting it in contemporary 70s was quite different. Regardless, Pet Sematary keenly scrutinises on the character aspects above all else. In fact, the introspective elements are more prominent than the gothic ones. You go into this wanting a fun, scary horror novel, and you're met with this morbid but therapeutic tale about unfathomable grief.
Unfathomable grief.
I suppose it shares a lot in common with films like Hereditary or Don't Look Now or Antichrist, these horrors that double as showcases of the turmoil of grief. Again, not too much happens on a plot level, but the book's pull is all in the telling. It's how Stephen King writes around this small amount of events which makes it engaging. And again, he is known for his talent for envisioning these visceral horror scenarios, but time and time again, as I was reading this book, I was shown just how good he is at weaving together these poignant statements about a given subject matter.
What I am is a novelist. I'm a storyteller. It's even simpler than that. I'm attracted to themes that have to do with the bizarre, sometimes with the grotesque, sometimes the suspenseful.
I suppose I ought to explain the story of this book a little bit. It does actually start out with your typical family moving into a new mysterious house. Well, it's not so much the house, it's more so the path behind the house, which is mysterious. It's in a town called Ludlow, Maine, and if you read Stephen King books, you'll realise that every fucking book of his is set in Maine. I'm pretty sure he grew up there, he lived there, so he just writes what he knows. I mean, a lot of his characters are also novelists or aspiring novelists. Everything's very autobiographical. Not in this book, however. The main character in this, Louis Creed, is a doctor, not a novelist, not an author. Upon arrival, the family are greeted by this friendly old couple who live next door or across the road to them. The old husband is called Judd Crandall, and Judd is the one who warns the family of the road that they live adjacent to, because this road is infamous for killing household pets. It's a very, very dangerous road. A lot of big trucks frequently use it, and they're always going at high speeds, so unfortunately a lot of pets meet their demise on it, and I think sometimes maybe even a human or two. And of course the main family have their own pet cat. I mean, you can see it's the whole point of the book. Yeah, the pet cat's named Church. I wonder if anything bad's going to happen to that little critter. You later find out about this old tradition in Ludlow where a lot of the kids would bury their pets in the woods in a place called the Pet Cemetery. This mysterious path behind the house leads to this pet cemetery. However, beyond this initial pet cemetery is yet another path which is blocked by a deadfall. You don't know where this path leads, but you're told never to go down there. Oh no, you don't want to go down that road. Oh, and by the way, I watched the 1989 film yesterday, and in that they pronounced the main character's name as Lewis. I always thought it was Louis when I was reading, because the way it's spelled can either be pronounced as like Louis or Lewis. Since I always imagined it as Louis, I'm going to just continue referring to the character as Louis in this book, in this video, sorry. Fuck it. His name's Louis. Now later on in the story, it is Thanksgiving and Louis has been left alone in this new house because the rest of the family have gone to visit Louis's in-laws and he really doesn't get along with them at all. The phone rings, Louis goes to pick it up, and on the other end is Judd, who solemnly says that he's found a dead cat on his lawn and he thinks it might be Louis's. Louis goes out to meet Judd Crandell on his lawn, and lo and behold, it is the family cat. It's been run over. How sad. Now it's at this point where Judd quite spontaneously leads Louis up the path past the initial pet cemetery over the deadfall, instructing Louis to bring the cat's body with them. Judd leads him through a forest, followed by a very mysterious bog, and then finally up a set of stairs that are carved into this cliff face. And atop these makeshift stairs lies yet another burial ground, a particularly special Indian burial ground. And it's here where Judd tells Louis to bury his cat, and he tells him that he has to do it all on his own, he can't have help. The next day, Louis is in his garage, and lo and behold, the cat walks in alive and well. However, something is very much amiss, as you might have guessed. It's because Louis didn't bury him with his prized prime bottle. Now from here on out, it becomes quite clear that the cat is not itself. In fact, you could say that it is possessed by some mysterious, malevolent force. It smells awful, it behaves in very uncanny ways, it keeps bringing in dead animals, like even crows at one point. Months go by, obviously the rest of the family don't know. The daughter doesn't know that her cat has been resurrected, but they all sense that something is off, they smell that horrible smell, and all the while Louis has to live with this secret, live with this decision he's made, but he does sort of manage to repress it a little bit. A lot of the writing in this book is about Louis compartmentalizing all of these fucked up things that he does. He's a very non-superstitious character, and when faced with undeniable supernatural forces, he has to compartmentalize it in certain ways. There's a lot of paragraphs about him trying to come to terms with these things and live with them, yet not totally accepting them. Now, I am leaving out a lot of other details, but that all essentially transpires within the first half of the book. The second half of the book begins with a monstrous gut punch. It's another fatality in the family. This time, their young, a 1.5-year-old son, Gage, is hit by a truck on the road. And don't laugh, don't fucking laugh.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
After that, the story follows the mundane yet morbid proceedings, with the family going through all of the necessary arrangements, the funeral and whatnot. And it's during this period where the book hits you with its depiction of immense grief. This is the very worst thing that can happen to a family, and it's happened. Again, a lot of the chapters in this book are devoted to very real-world things like funerals and family tragedy. Now, assuming that you haven't seen the film or read the book, I'd gather that from what I've already told you about the story, you know exactly where this is leading to. You know where this is going, Louis knows it, Judd knows it, and most importantly, Stephen King knows it, and he knows that the readers know it. And so his writing plays out accordingly. There are no more twists to occur in the story. You can see all the way around the corner, yet the novel plays into that. It retains your interest and captivation despite you knowing more or less exactly what's going to happen, and for it to be able to do that is very impressive. It's a very depressing read from that point onwards, but the whole time it carries with it this theme or this sense of inevitable evil. The instant his son is killed, Louis knows that he's going to take him up to the burial ground, despite how macabre it's probably going to turn out. In his heart, he knows that it won't really be the real Gage. He knows it'll end in misery, but he's this desperate, grieving father, and he's been given this option. He's completely self-aware of his desperation too, and the book goes to great lengths to illustrate this. Yet this knowledge of one's own flaws is still not going to stop him, and again you have this idea of inevitability. It does remind me an awful lot of Dune's Paul Atreides, who knew exactly where his road would lead. He knew exactly what actions to take to get him to that destination. He knew it would end in a jihad. He knew it was going to bring catastrophe, basically. He knew that it was going to be bad, and he knew exactly what he could do to avoid it, yet he still went down that path. He knew about all of his own shortcomings and his sense for vengeance, but that self-awareness did not stop him. And it's such a fascinating concept, because imagine that feeling of being totally self-aware of all of your critical thinking faculties, all of your decision making, yet still being unable to restrain yourself from your base urges, emotions and instincts. The whole time Paul Atreides is like, yeah, I know my son's going to get blown up and I know it's going to piss me off beyond belief, but if I just avoid doing anything rash after that, if I just avoid, it's happened now, this has really pissed me off, I might just go and scourge the universe, kill 30 billion people. What happens in the latter half of Pet Sematary is almost like a foretold prophecy, and the fact that you, the reader, know what's going to happen only adds to that theme. The book even comes out and tells you about various character deaths before they occur, like with Norma Crandell, for instance. It literally gives you a countdown as it says something to the effect of, oh yes, this heart attack wasn't fatal, unlike the one she'd have in 6 weeks. And it's the same with the son Gage. His death is casually announced at the end of one crucial chapter in which Louis enjoys a day out with him flying a kite. It's a wonderful day for Louis, and it even says at the beginning of the chapter this was the last real good day of his life. And when that piece of lore was just casually dropped like that, it hit me like a fucking freight train, took the wind out my sails. The sheer nonchalantness of the announcement, it was so blunt and brutal. Having these deaths telegraphed to us does not diminish the tension in any way, because the intrigue, if you could call it intrigue, comes from the misery of the circumstances that the family find themselves in. Again, it's all about the human element, the grief. Stephen King also holds nothing back when describing the death of Gage and the brutality of it. It never veers into the realm of sensationalism, but it's more than enough to make you feel disturbed and sad. I mean, you can imagine what a 16-wheeler truck does to a toddler. It's like, smash! Smash it! We're just gonna kill him! Bye-bye! Bye-bye! Jokes aside though, there are numerous grisly depictions of death in this book, and it's fitting because it's all about the fear of death. Gage's is undoubtedly the worst, but you also have Victor Pascal's death near the start of the book, as well as the slow demise of Rachel's sister in that flashback chapter. It's not doing this to be shocking, it's doing this because it's a horror novel where one of the central themes is death, and it wants to challenge and confront you with some of the most abhorrent depictions of death, some of the most frightening incarnations of death. It's about the fear of death, and so it makes you feel that emotion quite purposefully and potently. And in the case with Pet Sematary, it's not so much the existential fear of your own death, it's more so the fear of losing a loved one.
What about now as an adult? What scares you now?
Oh, I guess probably the deaths of my children. That idea scares me.
Now, if you are someone who is freaked out by the concept of death, this book might be a good trial by fire novel for you, because again, it confronts you with some abhorrent imagery regarding the subject. It comes at you head on, you know. Ultimately, I would say that the book is therapeutic when it comes to coming to terms with death and all of its scary qualities. It's very dark, it's very challenging, but ultimately its takeaway message is a constructive one that we can learn from. There's one particular monologue which really delves into the concept of death and how it's all around you, ever present. It could take a loved one at any moment. You can't predict it, you can't control it. It's this terrifying truth of existence, yet we can learn learn to live alongside it and accept it. It's when you try and wrestle with this impossible force where things become awful, and that is exactly what this book is about. Louis tries to defy the transcendental certainty of death and thus brings heinous things into his world. Gage comes back as a demon toddler baby and kills Judd, kills Louis's wife Rachel. We all knew something bad was going to happen, yet it doesn't make these deaths any less savage. Regardless of us being able to telegraph that, the chapter was still terrifying and horrendous. I do believe King went to a darkness not dissimilar to the darkness that Linda Blair went to for The Exorcist. The act of defying death itself is a perverse, unnatural act, and that's why Gage comes back in the manner that he does. He is a manifestation of that perverseness. The process of resurrecting Gage and resurrecting Church as well is portrayed in this manner as if someone were forcing something that will not move or should not move. It's Louis' knowing denial of the truth that leads to his downfall, his mental deterioration. There's a very poignant line that sums his psyche up at a crucial moment. The flaw is only the inability to accept, not uncommon. Not uncommon because we all easily fall into this trap of denying death or denying any truth that's just too unpleasant to handle. It's a comfortable trap to fall into because the idea that you can escape such things is very blissful, and this explains why there's this seductive element to the path beyond the house. This euphoric high that it gives the characters, it's so powerful it's almost mind control. I love how near the start of the book you learn that Rachel, the wife character, is so petrified of the concept of death, so much so that she, as an adult, denies these fundamental truths. It's such a fascinating but sympathetic character flaw. At this point, Louis is the voice of reason. He tries to challenge Rachel. He's the doctor, he's the man of science, he knows all about death. Yet he is the one who is seduced by the pull of the burial ground. He is the one that brings all of this malevolence into his family's life. It's telling us that no matter who we are, no matter how much we think we've figured our shit out, we aren't immune to this kind of desperation. It's a really good book. Sometimes dead is better.
Death! Death is coming. Death is here. Death is outside. There's no escape.
Also the line, the soil of a man's heart is stonier, man grows what he can and tends to it. That can mean so many things. Make sure that the soil of your heart doesn't turn all hard and stony. Make sure you don't delude yourself. And don't repress the idea of death or anything you're afraid of. Don't make it this horrid secret that's locked away in your subconscious.
Well, almost everything that's in the novel and in the movie up to a certain point really happened.
What makes this book a lot more interesting is the fact that it's very autobiographical for Stephen King. A lot of the things in this book, the non-supernatural stuff of course, actually happened to Stephen King. He and his family moved into this house which sat adjacent to this deadly road which was infamous for killing pets. His daughter's pet cat was killed on this road and she had trouble coming to terms with death. She had trouble accepting the demise of her cat, and she even said the line that Stephen King would incorporate into the novel, which was, why can't God have his own cat, essentially. Let God have his own cat, Smoky was my cat.
My daughter's cat was run over in the road. There was a lot of heavy traffic, a lot of big fertilizer trucks that went back and forth, and she was very upset. It was her first experience with death.
Not long after the death of the family cat, there was another incident where Stephen King's 1.5-year-old ran towards the road in the same manner that Gage did in the book. There was a huge truck coming by, but fortunately the son did not reach the road. Now Stephen King says that he doesn't actually remember whether he caught the kid and pulled him back or the kid stumbled on his own. That's a blur to him. But this whole incident left a very lasting impression on him. He began to contemplate what if the other alternative happened, how horrendous that would be, and to sort of come to terms with that, he wrote this book to explore these very dark things, these fears that every parent has, this idea that for your child death looms around the corner. At any random moment you might just get unlucky. And yeah, so for that this book is very dark because it's sort of like Stephen King mapping out all of his fears.
If you're mentally disturbed, you go to a psychiatrist and you pay them $75 or $100 an hour to hear what scares you. And what I do is I write it down and people pay me.
Mm-hmm. And so is this good therapy for you, just to kind of express your fears on paper?
It's the best.
Upon finishing and reading through the book, King believed that he'd gone too far with the darkness and brutality, and to this day he perceives it as the most frightening book that he's ever written, the one that scares him the most. And I can certainly see why. Sometimes artists make works that disturb themselves the most because they stem from the darkest regions of their own mind. You feel like you've let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak. Like, what have I unleashed upon this ink and paper? What have I released from my dark-ass mind?
Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
Closing comments, I'd strongly recommend Pet Sematary, the novel. It is actually a loose adaptation of the Wendigo myth as well. It does include that, but it is, again, it's very loose. I wouldn't really read it for that. It does change up the lore on that one quite a lot. It's more so just about the themes and everything. There are also a lot of very interesting biblical references, like Lazarus is brought up a lot. That's very cool. It's like very aptly used. There's a quote regarding Lazarus at the beginning of every act. And I'd also like to mention that I think King is very effective at incorporating pop culture into his books without it ever feeling pandering. He does it to link the book's world closer to our own world, so it feels like, oh, this is actually happening in the world that I live in. These characters that are going through this exist in my reality. They've seen the films I have, they've read the books I have. Like in It, for instance, Pennywise takes the form of whatever frightens you the most, so if you've seen a film that's freaked you out, it'll embody the monster from that film. And throughout that book you hear about it taking the form of the creature from the Black Lagoon and even the shark from Jaws at one point. And it was like right at that point in the 70s where everyone was freaked the fuck out by Jaws, and so this entity that's this embodiment of fear taking the form of the shark from that film is just very fitting. And it's also good that he incorporates this real stuff because it might pertain to real world history and stuff like that. The savage history of America, like that's all about what The Shining's about.
You see, that ski run was once a burial ground to a tribe of vampire Wichita Indians who ate the flesh of children with no eyes. Yeah, a lot of history on that ski run.
Now before we end, I'll just go over a few criticisms that I have with the book, just, I've been very positive. These are only minor though, so who cares. There's one singular, kind of out of place instance of near pornographic sexuality, like it's in every Stephen King book apparently. Apparently he's got real George R.R. Martin flair to him. But yeah, that's in there. I'm not really too miffed about it. Sort of feels out of place, but I don't know, maybe I'm just becoming a prude in my old age. But no, it is a bit weird. And also, this isn't a real criticism, but he talks about the wind an awful lot in this book. I know it's to set the scene, it's to create an atmosphere, and it's very effective at doing that, but fucking hell, he loves the wind. Like, every fucking scary chapter begins with the wind fingered through Louis's hair viciously. It really pierced through his heart at that moment. Oh, you better believe this wind ain't fucking around. It's real scary, this wind. But maybe I should commend it, because by the end of each chapter, you feel like you've been harassed by the wind for 3 hours. You feel like you've just been, crikey. Apart from that, shit, I shouldn't do that. That's not good. Let's keep this book intact. Thanks to the patrons. Thank you, Matt Delaney. Thank you, Casey Gann. Thank you, DF. Thank you, Mason Lydon.